What's up guys, Shawnthebro here, and today we're going to be going over another items episode in the Super Smash Brothers tutorial and Platform Fighter tutorial series. So in this episode we're going to be able to do two new things. So we're going to allow items to launch and deal the rest of the standard damage operations to opponents, because before we were calling the take damage method, but we were only actually dealing damage. We weren't performing launch, we weren't setting an owner to know who harmed the other player and that sort of behavior. Now the other thing we're going to want to be able to do is have a max number of uses on an item, which we'll go through a little bit later in the episode. I'll do a live example of one method, however it will have its own episode dedicated to it. But I want to get it started so you can start playing around with it, because it is a topic that has a lot of different use cases and different methods you could perform it. Now, if I am to demo this, so let's grab a weapon and let's launch it. You see that I hit the opponent, and it did launch the character a slight amount that I hit. You saw them move a little bit, so let's go back over here and let's try it again. There you go, and you can see that it's starting to move the character a little bit more every time. As their damage goes up, so does the launch that is going to be applied to them. And if I did not miss, that would be better. So let's hit them again. Starting to launch them farther and farther away each time. Okay, so here, now I have this configuration where my playing character is on the right, and that character is on the left, the character we're going to be hitting. So let's hit them. You see they get launched the proper direction. They actually got launched off the platform as well. So that's what we'll be able to do after today's episode. We'll add those launch mechanics to the thrown items, as well as, you know, we already have that on the hitboxes, so we'll use some logic from there and update our existing logic on the items to support that. Like I said, we're also going to cover some max uses, but I'll give you a demo of that after we do this stuff, because it is going to be there's a lot of variation that you can do, and I wanted to give you guys a lot of options, which is why I'm breaking it up like this. So we'll check it out in a little bit. But to get started with today's episode, if you want to get caught up in the series, I believe we're on episode 42 of the Platform Fighter and Super Smash Brothers tutorial series. So if you want to get caught up, like I said, there is a playlist right here in the top right corner. You can click that and it'll show you everything that we've done to get to this point in the playlist. If you're not interested in that, but you would like to see how we've handled our item system so far, I'll link you to the first episode right here in this iCard in the top right corner of the screen. Otherwise, we can go ahead and get started. So we're going to start in the code today, because we're going to add some variables. So let's go to our code. We're going to go to baseitem.h. And we're going to scroll down. I've added 3 different variables here today. So I have a base horizontal launch, base vertical launch, and a int max usage. We already had a base throw damage, but that is going to come into play today. So if you don't already have that, I'd add it now. And so we have these launch variables, and we have a horizontal and a vertical launch that are separate, but they don't have to be separate. If you would like your items to do a standard, you know, this is the launch amount, and that's broken into horizontal and vertical based on where the item hits, that's perfectly fine. In fact, we might actually end up going that route anyway, but I wanted to give full freedom here while we're going over this, because this is how we handled our launching for our hitboxes as well. So I wanted to make sure that everything that we had on there, on our standard hitboxes, can be transferred to the item. Even when if we go to turn items into, you know, if we give items hitboxes for logistics, then we'll still want to know what the item has as its base launch and damage values. So again, you can keep them the same. You don't have to separate them between horizontal and vertical, but I did. That's how we did it on our hitboxes. So with that aside, make sure you have at least one launch variable. If you're doing it like me, you can go ahead and add both these guys right here. Then we're going to want to max uses as well, because like I said, we're going to start going over durability or number of times an item can be used today. Alright, now if we go into our base item CPP, and we go and look at our constructor where we set all of our default values, we should default these as well. So I put it right in the order of the variables in the .h file. So we have our throw damage, which was already set to 0. Horizontal and vertical launch are also, I'm going to default to 0. I'm going to put max number of uses to 1. I'm not going to put the 0 because every item should be able to be used at least once. Even if it's a consumable like food, I'm going to consider it using it when we actually interact with it. So it's still going to get the 1 use before it disappears. So yeah, I'm going to set max uses to 1. Alright, with that, that's actually all we need to do in the code for right now. Other things we could do later for the durability, but we'll leave it alone for now. And let's go back into the editor. And we're going to grab our base item BP, base weapon BP, and sword weapon BP. Those are the 3 I'm going to open. So I'm going to go to the sword weapon BP first because I actually want to change some default values in here. So here's my sword. This is the weapon I was throwing around. I can also just standard attack with it. I don't have to throw it. And in the details panel under class defaults, I have all my default values. So I've given it a base throw damage of 10. I could, of course, hike that number up. I've also given it horizontal and vertical launch values as well. So if we want the launch to be a greater value, then I can make these, 950, and I can make them as specific as I want. I can say 2130, right, if I want to, whatever. And then when I come in here, if I am to play my game again, over here, actually interact with the item, and throw it. You see the launch was a lot more. It might not seem like a lot more, but it was a lot more. It was over double than what it was when the damage was 0. Because you have to remember, the launch is dependent on the damage as well. So you can see as their damage starts going up here. There we go. And they got launched right off. So see, standard hit. If I jump and do it again, it's going to go farther. There we go. If I do it even one more time, I will, let's see if I can back this character up. There we go. So if you kindly get out of my way so I can have this, I will put them, this guy never fell off. That's the wrong controls though. So here, let's put them here, right on that line, hit them again. And you can see how the launch is getting greater and greater. Okay, so that's how we can change these values. With this, I'm doing it on the sword weapon BP specifically because doing it here allows me to say this specific weapon has these values for the launch, for the max uses. Speaking of max uses, I've set it to 2 on the sword just as an example. We'll demo that later. You can go ahead and set it now. And then base weapon BP, you can see my defaults are all the same. I haven't changed them, and same with base item BP. So I'm only changing the defaults on the specific weapon. Otherwise, I'm leaving it as general as possible. That way it's not affecting anything else, any of the other logic. All right, if we go into base item BP today, then we can go down and go to where our collision with a thrown item is. In that case, that is the on component begin overlap with the damage collider. So what we do is we check if it's hit an opponent, and if it has hit an opponent that's not the owner, and the state of this item is thrown, we're ready to deal damage. However, before we were just calling take damage with some default values. We don't want to do that. We should go ahead and actually use these values, or use the proper inputs for this function, because we want the intended behavior to occur, not just some random behavior like increasing the health counter. So we can change everything in here basically, except base throw damage is fine. If you had already plugged this in like I did in the previous episode, that's fine. We don't have to do anything about base throw damage unless you can charge a throw or they have some sort of modifier on them. The damage from the item itself that it does by default when colliding with an opponent is perfectly fine. So I'm going to leave base throw damage alone. Now instead of 0, we're going to pass in base horizontal launch and base vertical launch. Again, if you're using only one launch variable, that is perfectly fine. You can actually pass it into both horizontal and vertical launch. But regardless, fill these out so it's not just 0. That way there is some launch. And the way you get these is very simple. You just type get and then the name of the variable. So get base horizontal launch, and then get base vertical launch. Okay, instigator we did not have before, but instigator is something we set up and take damage, which is how we can credit people for defeating an opponent or for damaging an opponent. And this can be really useful for a lot of stuff. It is an actor because it can be more than just a character. It could be an assist trophy. It could be some ultimate that spawns special things. It could be the stage hazard. So it had to be more broad than just a simple character. So I made it an actor. With that, what we want to do is we actually want to get the owner who threw it. I mean, you could pass it. You could actually use self as the instigator here and pass it the item that collided with this character. However, I'm going to credit the owner of the weapon as the instigator. It's not to say that we won't want to know what item hit them, so we might want to have instigator and like weapon owner as two different fields in the future, but for now this is perfectly fine, just as long as we know who's dealing the damage. And so for the instigator, I actually just pass in get owner, because the owner of this weapon at the current time is whoever had it equipped. It does not ever have its owner reset, by the way. The owner does not get reset. And should it? Potentially. It depends. You could reset the owner when it lands and when it's no longer being used, and that would be fine. But some items, you throw them and they're active until they are picked up again. The most likely case is that we're going to split it up and do different functionality for each, because I love being as thorough as possible in the series. But for now, we don't have to reset the owner, so just know that this get owner node is referring to the owner of the base item BP, which will be whoever interacted with it last. Hit location is also important. It'll be more important later for special launching, where we launch off angle hit and when we display particle effects. But for now, it's still important. It's important to know where we hit them, if we were on the left side or the right side. So hit location is still super useful even now. What we should do for that is just get the actual location of the weapon or of the item. So for both these nodes, we just get owner. It's the first one. And get actor location. Pass these in to the take damage function. And then should launch match character direction. I have as yes. Whenever you're throwing one, I'm not really leaving it up for determination by the game. Like with the hitbox, we could have some moves where the launch does not match the character direction, because you might have a move that pulls in a character. You might have a hitbox that collided on the other side of the character because it's, say, some sort of overhead and you're trying to launch them the other way. Because of this, we might not always want to launch the character in the direction they were facing, or the direction that the attacker was facing. And so I'm having it match the character direction, yes. You can uncheck it if you want, play around with it. They're both good methods, just depends on your intended behavior. Again, we've already covered that, so I won't go too deep into that, but just so you can see what I have, this is what I got. The rest of this doesn't need to be changed at all. This is all about the projectile movement components, which work fine. Aren't giving us any issues. Alright, with that out of the way, we have our fully functional throwing items, colliding, launching, getting the owner, getting the location, all that good stuff. I want to talk to you about durability for a bit. Again, this is going to have its own episode, but let's get it started so you can play around with it, because the episode is going to show a few different methods. So we're going to do the base logic that you can use for every method. So we have the max uses here, which needs to be set per item, or you can always use the default. But if you're going to have durability, there's a good chance that the items could have different durabilities and the weapons could have different durabilities. So we could have items where they have multiple uses. So you have a heal orb, and you can use it 3 times to heal yourself at 3 different intervals. Even if you're not dealing damage, that is considered a use. We could also have a weapon like the sword, where if we hit an opponent, say 5 times, we want to break the sword. So there is a lot of freedom here. I'm going to make the max use of something like 2 for this example, just because we can do it quickly. And if we do it on our use item now, okay, so we have base weapon BP, we have an event use item, which is where we actually pick up and attach the weapon. But we could actually take the max uses, get it, and we could actually decrement it, or minus, which is going to take one away from it. Just like this. You actually don't have to set it if you do this. This will return the new value for max uses. And so if we were to do that, the way this one would work is that we could pick it up a set amount of times. So if I were to throw it, it's going to do the standard logic, and then I can equip it again. Now the max uses would actually be 0 at this point. And so we would probably want to do something like destroy it. So we can use this value to check if it's less than or equal to, less than or equal to 0. And then if it is, we're going to destroy the actor of self. Now, it's going to be a lot more advanced than this in the other episodes. Again, I'm just showing you an example so you can set this up and know what our intentions are going into that much more detailed episode. Alright, so I can throw a weapon, pick it up again. You see I ran out of uses. So if I do that, it works. However, that's not really what I want, right? It could be what I want. Maybe I only want to be able to pick it up that number of times. So that is one potential method you could use. If you actually want to use it the number of times listed, like how I had sword weapon BP as max uses of 2, if you want to do that, you could change this to less than 0 instead of less than equal to 0. And here you go. So if I throw it and go use it, get it again, throw it again. Now when I go to pick it up this time, it will be destroyed because that's what our behavior dictates. That's one method you could use. This is just for how many times you can equip it. So it's probably the least interesting method, but it is a possible potential method. The more useful methods are the ones I'll be showing you in the next item episode, which is where we actually cover how the item can deal damage to the opponent, then be considered used and take away from one of the uses that it has. Another alternative is when we actually use it, whether or not we collide with them. So if I were to punch and my item type was sword, or say I have an item at all, I check the item's max uses and decrement it. But for now, this is okay because this is not the durability episode, but we're going to be going over that stuff regardless. And I wanted to make sure that we had a solid base for that. We know what the max uses is for, where it's at in the base item, and setting it on all the different items. But that's all I got, guys. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please subscribe. It does more for myself and the channel than anything else you can do. I just really appreciate it. I want to give a huge shout out to my YouTube membership and Patreon members and supporters. I'm just glad you guys are enjoying this series as much as I am. I really, really love working on these games and showing you what we can make with them. And I hope you guys are enjoying them as well. So thank you guys so much. If you did have any issues, though, with this tutorial or any of my videos, feel free to join the Discord community. There's a link in the description. We'll go over everything you need to do to get that sorted. We'll look at it and we'll fix it up. It's completely free. I'd be happy to help you guys. Anyway, guys, that's all I got. So thank you so much for watching. I'm Shawnthebro, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.